to Mind Reader by Lost Hairdressers. My name is Clint and I hope you enjoy the conversation.
No, I love traveling. It's you know, it's changed quite a lot since COVID. Really, I think. I mean, even though the doors are open now, I think people have got used to working with teams where you know where they are. Really, I think that changed a lot of things, right? So, you know, the guys wanting to fly you out on a business flight from the UK, they're like, well, you know, it's a big spend for them. So I kind of get it, but I miss it, you know. But
that's true. That's true. Were you did you move back to England for work, or were you just ready to go home?
No, I was not ready to go home. In fact, I wasn't ready to leave New York, but my wife was, who I kind of met in New York. So, and she's from Australia.
Got it.
And she wanted to go back to Australia, which was an interesting 3 years.
Oh, so you did it?
Moved to moved there for love, you know, and then you know, I was doing so much traveling, I just couldn't do it anymore. You know, it's like the furthest you could be away from anywhere in the world, right? It's literally right at the bottom.
Yeah, that would be brutal.
A day of flying, a day and a night of flying is like 24 hours flying. You know, and after 3 years, I think I just completely wrecked my body. Really, you know. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And so you brought her to London. You've convinced her.
Yeah.
Good. Nice job.
It was hard.
No doubt. Yeah, the Australians love their home for sure. So, you know. I know, you know, I've been reading a lot of interviews with you, and I honestly almost kind of feel terrible asking you this, but, you know, music's been such a huge part of your world.
Yes.
And it was mine too. And it really, you know, I don't know, maybe effectively introduced me to this world of hair too, you know? Yeah. So especially kind of the punk scene, and I was really curious because I hadn't heard this in any of your interviews, but what was kind of your first punk show? Oh, yes. Fantastic. I love it. I proposed to my wife in front of a jukebox to a Misfits song. So it's part of my world.
Barry's going to love you forever. That's what I got to
say. So was it Misfits? Was that your first show?
No, oh God, I wish. No, my first show was it was amazing actually. I was 15, and it was in a punk club in Covent Garden, the first punk club ever, really. It was run by Billy Idol, and it was run by another guy who was a really was a man on the scene back then called Don Letts. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Yeah, I have heard the name.
He was like instrumental. He was like reggae and dubs ambassador to the punk scene, because when I was a punk and I was going to see bands, really. There were only two bands with records, UK bands with records, right? When people were going to clubs, right? So the music that we listened to was like, you know, like obviously MC5, right? You know, Iggy, you know, the Dead Boys, you know. That kind of thing. So there was very little vinyl, and Bowie. Everyone used to listen to Bowie. combined with like a lot of reggae music. So
Right.
the reggae scene and the punk scene were very closely interlinked in the UK.
So, I've always really
Very
loved
interlinked, you know.
Yeah. I've always loved that link musically. I mean, you could talk about Bad Brains, in particular.
And Death and bands like, you know.
Mm-hmm. Wait, who did you say? Sorry.
Death.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Pure Hell and, you know, bands like that. So you know, for me, it was I went to this club and I saw a band. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they were a band called Wire.
Wire is probably my favorite of all time.
They were the first band I ever saw.
That's insane. So was this like the Pink Flag era or before?
Pre Pink Flag. It was like one single. It was 1-2-XU, which was
Yeah.
And the single wasn't even out when I saw them. Right, they didn't even have a record deal, and they played with They played with the original Adam and the Ants.
Yes.
Who used to be an incredible punk band.
Right.
And another band called Menace, who were quite amazing as well. So it was a triple bill. It changed my life, actually.
I mean, that is an unbelievable start.
We never knew this, right? We never knew that this was like, history in the making.
Yes.
No one really knew that, right? At that point in time, it was just the way things were, right? In London,
Mm-hmm. My introduction to Wire was through Minor Threat, who covered 1-2-XU. And I didn't know anything about it. And I was just starting to figure out that, punk music could be intelligent too, And actually, my first Wire album that I purchased was Chairs Missing.
Oh, right. And so you got the second album. Right.
Yeah, it was just blew my mind. I mean, still to this day, it's cinematic. It's everything. It's got all the elements, and then that's amazing.
Yeah, like I Am the Fly is probably the weirdest reggae record you've ever heard, right?
Yes, for sure.
That's what I'm trying to say. There was, and then we had bands like the Slits.
Yes, love the Slits. Yeah.
So it was all really quite linked.
Yeah, it's interesting that didn't travel. I know this is not a music podcast, but that. The United States got a lot of ska punk, but the reggae punk, I don't know. It was done so tastefully in the UK, and I don't know of a lot of bands that did that in the United States like it was done there. There might be some. I just don't know.
No, there actually wasn't much. I mean, like our first mix of that was probably the Clash when they did Plebes and Thieves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is the first white band, I think, to cover like a reggae song.
Yeah. I mean,
they
broke it open. Yeah. Absolutely. And specials, and even today, I still hear that kind of. That influence even in more modern Massive Attack albums, they really kind of, I don't know, to me pushed that sound still.
Well,
they have this.
I guess what's really weird it's actually not weird. I think I was actually having a conversation with someone the other day, and a huge part of British culture, right, it comes from Jamaica.
Right.
Really,
mm-hmm.
Like a lot of it, and I think it's so ingrained in us. We're not even aware of it anymore, But at that point of time, there really was this, subculture, if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Absolutely. I mean, it's like two youth cultures happening at the same time, that were kind of quite revolutionary.
Yeah, literally. But they were saying the same thing.
Right.
They, and they came from the same place, but their parents didn't.
Mm-hmm. I guess maybe. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, and I guess for me, that's I think one of the huge influences I've I've had. And I think when we talk about what we do now, I think for me, my influences have always come from the underground, right? They never come from anything that is mainstream. Really, they never ever do. Right. And I think that's probably one of the things that has kind of, I would say, not probably, most definitely, is probably one of the things that has maybe given me longevity in my career, because I'm always intrigued and excited about life and what's going on culturally.
Beautiful.
And I guess that's that. Even
Go ahead.
I'm always cutting in. You go.
No, I love it. The timing on these videos is so terrible. I was looking kind of at your career and thinking about where you came from. It occurs to me how strange it could be from coming from kind of an underground subculture and then finding access to like this luxury, high fashion kind of world, right? And behind the scenes, it's like Yoshi Yamamoto, like he's an artist, right? So behind the scenes, you guys are all artists creating and presenting a thing, right? Yet the audience is kind of this, it's not all of them, but it's kind of can be this disconnected world that is maybe easy to resent, or maybe easy for the punk rockers you used to hang out with to resent. So, how do you keep yourself in that mix? I hope that question makes sense.
No, I guess for me, I'm intrigued by ideas, and I think, right. I think who you are, you attract who you are, or elements of your personality or your thought process or an aesthetic. I think you attract people, and obviously I've been lucky enough to have attracted some really very incredibly creative people and visionaries, I guess, in my career, right? And I think that for me is probably how I've ended up doing that. I mean, I think most designers, right, that are forward thinking really do come from environments like that. Like if I look at Yoji, or I look at Ray Kawakubo, or Alexander McQueen, there are these kind of, there is a thread that runs throughout it, and I guess the thread is self-expression. I'm guessing, or having a vision, and like Lee McQueen most definitely, and John Galliano, guys like that are obviously visionaries, and Westwood. Like Westwood was, I guess, my first introduction to fashion, even though I never saw it as fashion, because to me that's what the Pistols wore.
Right.
Punk to me wasn't a fashion. It was an attitude. Right.
Absolutely.
A way of being. So I think, in fashion, I think people with lots of money are always attracted to youth, right, and energy, and having you know, having this kind of a freer sense of being, you know, having an opinion. You know, like if I look at, you know, like Balenciaga, like now, and you know, I look at what's been done recently, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is incredibly different, right, to where the brand started out, right? And I think the reason behind that is, you know, culturally, it's a very different time, you know, and
Right.
I think people of my age or even younger, right, have all do end up over a period of time in those kind of jobs, right, that are high end, right, if they have a point of view and you know, and they can build numbers, right, and sell stuff. You know, I think it's a natural process. I think the hardest part of that process, right, is retaining, right, your individuality,
Sure.
right, and staying true to yourself, and not selling out. Really, I think that's the hardest thing, because you know you acquire luxuries, right? Like now, right? I was talking to someone the other day about it, and they were talking about punk. And it's really weird. Like in some ways, you can talk about punk to someone, and they see punk as, you know, like a leather-studded jacket and a mohawk, right?
Right.
And then you can talk to someone who's kind of lived it, like, you know, like Nick Knight or Skinheads. Like I work with Nick quite a lot, you know, and to me and to him, punk wasn't about having spiky hair,
Right.
It was most definitely an energy and an attitude, and it had to happen because the rules needed to be broken and changed. You know, like you have to destroy things to create new things, right? And it was it was a zeitgeist, right, of you know, like youth, right, at that time. And it was really important. It would have happened anyway, right?
Right.
You know, but you know, Malcolm McLaren saw an avenue, right, and went there. You know, so you know that's just part of it. You know, things evolve, people grow. We're lucky enough, right, if we can hold on to what we treasured as younger people, right, and bringing forward, right, into our present lives, and not feel like we've compromised. And I consider myself to be very lucky in that sense.
Totally.
Privileged, actually, I think is the word. So, you know, and I think that's the time. And now, right, we're in a very different time, right, which is, you know, social media.
Yep, it's a weird time.
It's a strange time because you kind of feel that it's opened the doors to communication. Yet, you know, no one's communicating in a more personal way.
Sure.
You know, people are not as sociable as they were. Our lives are very are open to everyone. You know, so in terms of privacy, right, I think we have very little privacy and very little freedom, even though we feel we do have freedom and we can express our voices. I think that's made people become incredibly aware of themselves, right, and aware of the implications of their words. Right, and I think we live in a very fear-based culture at the moment, right? Because everyone is really concerned about how people feel about them, or what the outside, the image of themselves in the outside world, how the outside world sees them.
So lots of self-editing going on.
It's a lot of editing, right? It's also a lot of compromising, and it doesn't allow any room for mistakes or failures. Like everyone wants to get it right straight away, and I don't really know whether that's possible, right?
Yeah.
Like I think it's very important to make mistakes, especially when you're learning, right? I mean, we're constantly we are students anyway, right? But to do it not to make mistakes in the public eye is like not particularly great, right?
Sure. Well, they're almost unforgivable now.
Yeah, and I think that when you create a dialogue like that, you create a lot of maybe subservient people that are afraid.
Yeah. Maybe even by intention. Who knows? It seems by design.
Well, we could do conspiracy theories for days, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I just think that's the thing. I think there's a sense of freedom that's been lost.
Yes, I completely agree.
And I kind of notice it with a lot of my assistants, like they're so together. They're like so on the money. They know exactly where they want to go, and they want to get there really quickly, right? And I think the longer game is the game that will prove to be more successful, but I don't think a lot of people are actually aware of that.
So for your assistants, what is the opposite of that for you? Because obviously, if someone gets to assist Eugene Souleiman, like that's a big deal. So they would want to be as on it as possible. But what would you prefer regarding their attitude or their execution?
I work on the premise, right, that everyone should be an individual, and everyone should bring them to the table, regardless, right, of whether it makes sense to them or not. I always like this kind of team of misfits or individuals coming together, right, and people contributing in their own special way, because everyone's really special in their own way, right? I much prefer that, and I like to give people freedom, right, and responsibility, and nice. I think that's just generally how I work, because I really think if someone steps out of their boundaries just a little, right, they grow. Yeah. Right, and they become more confident, more aware, and they have a stronger, a bigger sense of self-worth, which I really like. Like, I think it's a huge mistake to say I'm looking for a specific type of individual, right, to be part of my team. Right. Because the minute you do that, you create competitiveness, but not in a good way. Right. Right. Yeah. You've got the same person. You've got 30 people that want to do the same thing. So it's like a little background, right? And I don't see it that way. I would much rather make people stronger, but stronger with their natural attributes. Right. I don't care if someone's really bad at something, then they don't need to do that. Right. I would rather they were better, right, at what they're great at. Yeah. You know, and I think that creates a strong kind of like equilibrium.
It certainly creates great music, that's for sure.
Absolutely, right? Well, I've never seen the difference in any of it, right? Yeah. And, I think that goes right across the board, music, life, art, whatever. I just think it's just a mentality that people live by, right? Yep. I don't see the difference.
I don't know if I do either. Because you mentioned selling out. I'm so curious what that looks like to you. What is Eugene's version of selling out? Because it would be different for everybody, right?
selling out to me would be, well, it's a number of things actually. Selling out for me would be to maybe half-ass do things. Would maybe also be not staying true to myself. I think authenticity plays a big part in it for me. And also like what you deem as successful, right? I don't think success has to come with you know, increasing your finances. I think success is whatever you choose to do, you enjoy doing. You know, like if you live your dream, whatever your dream is, right, you're successful.
Yeah.
Period. You know,
right.
I see it in a very, very, very basic way, you know. And I think that's it really. That's what I would call successful. Like I've got 2 daughters, you know, and for me, I don't really push education on them or anything, right? Obviously, you know, they're doing really well in that area, but it's not something I push on them or I say, you know, what do you want to do when you're when you're in your 20s? What kind of job do you want to do? Right?
How old are they?
Rosie is 17 and Noon is 13. But you know, for me, I just want my kids to live a fulfilling life that gives them pleasure and they're respectful of other people. Really, and that's it. You know, Rosie's incredibly driven, and she's going to go to art school. But you know, and Noon is like this little kind of unicorn fairy, little, you know, this completely different energy, right? To Rosie, and you know, but they are who they are, right? And I think, you know, like if you instill a good sense of they have moral fibre, right, and they're kind people. I think, you know, they should just be left to do what they feel is right for them.
Yeah, well said. Well said. You know, talking to someone like you is inspiring, you know, to say the least. Just because, you know, you kind of feel when you see somebody at your success level with your type of outlook, it does feel doable that you can be yourself and push through. You know, push through to create what you want to create, whether that's a world or, you know, your art, whatever it is.
You know, I think it's probably harder to be that way, but I think, you know, I think there's no point in being successful if you're not successful on your own terms, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Was there anyone in your past that that validated that same thought process for you? That was like, oh, like this is possible, or were you pretty self-driven?
I was pretty self-driven, and I've got to say, you know, like where I started at Trevor Sorbie, I mean, I was probably Trevor's worst nightmare.
In what sense?
As an employee, right? I was just. I mean, to this day, I really don't know how he put up with me, but he loved me and I loved him, and he loved the fact that I was against the grain. You know, he actually really loved that. But you know, it was challenging for him. You know, and I was completely unaware of how challenging it was for him until I had children, right? You know. Like I really was, you know. I thought, oh, it's perfectly normal to, like, you know, miss a flight to do a seminar, and you know, I was like, oh, I just missed a flight. I'll get another flight. You know, oh yeah, you know, it's like $300 car drive to some little Italian town, you know, from the airport. You know, it was like, yeah, that's fine. You know, we could. you know, and he was like getting bolder by the minute, like losing his hair, you know, and, you know, I mean, you know, Trevor, I think, was probably like the most, you know, inspiring person for me, I have to say. And I'm trying to think of who else. I mean,
what was it about Trevor that kind of, you know, despite your personality differences, like what was it about him that kind of did it for you?
We were very similar. We were both complete messes.
Okay.
We were, really.
Yeah.
And we really got on creatively. You know, he would be like, "What do you think of this, Eugene?" And I'd be like, "I think this." And he was like, "Why do you think that?" And I said, "Because of this."
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, that's a great idea. So I think I was helpful in kind of springboarding ideas for him, or having an ear and an opinion that he didn't quite understand, but he respected it sometimes. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Were you, because you had apprenticed somewhere just before Trevor, right? So like, did you feel like you had your, like, how do I put this? Did you feel confident in your eye by the time you got to Trevor? Because you were still relatively new in the industry.
No, dude, I was not even aware of an eye. Right, I absolutely no clue. Right, like none at all. I was completely in my own little head, right, my own world, right. You know, like I was so green, right. I thought all these pictures, hairdressing pictures that appeared in magazines and fashion magazines were just there, right. I had no idea that there was even a shoot or anything. It just didn't even enter my head, right.
Got it.
No idea. Completely oblivious to a lot of things, you know. But I kind of managed to mask it pretty well and pretend, right, to kind of get me to it and lie, because I had to.
Right.
Sure. It was just a complete blag. You know, like I remember going for an interview with him, and he said, "Can you do this? Can you do that?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I could." I had no idea what he was talking about. None. Right. No idea what he was talking about. And I found people to teach me those techniques, luckily. And, you know, like the first time I had an interview with him, he thought I was quite amusing, right? And he thought I was very cheeky. But I actually wasn't being cheeky. I just didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
Right? I thought that I did, but I had no clue, right? So, you know, I kind of... In England, we call it blags. If you blag a situation, means you kind of get in by the skin of your teeth, and you've been really lucky. So I kind of became his assistant that way, really. You know, and within a year, I was on the floor, kind of cutting hair, doing seminar work. You know, it was great. Yeah. Great experience.
Awesome. How long did that relationship last? I mean, the professional relationship.
About 14 years. I was there for quite a while. And, you know, like I really didn't have any plans to become a session hairdresser. But during that time, you know, we used to cut models who used to come into the salon, because it was a really, you know, huge, very trendy salon at the time. And there was a model agency across the road. And I started going out with this girl who was a model. And, you know, I got introduced to people. And every other weekend I would, you know, not go to work and do a magazine shoot, right, for like the Face magazine or ID or something like that, you know, like a younger alternative magazine. And without realising it, I built a portfolio up, and then I started working with a really great photographer called Craig McDean. And we started going to Paris, you know, doing these campaigns.
Wow.
And before you knew it, you were in Milan and you're in the Principe di Savoia hotel, right, doing Prada, right? And you're in this place we've never been to, with like, these chandeliers in the ceiling and a pianist and a cocktail bar, and it was a very different world, right? And then all of a sudden I realised, right, that I was actually doing something. It just dawned on me very quickly. And I woke up very fast.
Sorry, say that again. You did what very fast?
I woke up very fast.
Oh, you woke
up.
Okay.
I realised what was happening, right? You know.
Yeah. Now, did that Craig McDean thing happen prior to you kind of linking with well, let's say, like, this is so hard because you've got such a journey, I know that you linked up with Pat, and that was pretty
I linked up with
great.
Pat. I linked up with Craig first.
Okay.
And then I did a job with Pat, and I loved Pat. I thought she was fantastic, and I introduced her to Craig.
Okay.
And
okay.
We started working as a team.
The three of you, huh?
Yeah.
Just so I get an idea, about how old are you guys at the time?
I was about 26, I think.
Okay. Awesome.
24, 26, something like that. I mean, for me, I really took my time going into the session world. Like, I always used to cut hair in a salon because I love cutting hair. And I never really saw it as a career. I always saw it as fun. Right, I just saw it as this extra thing that was really interesting. Right, I never saw it as like, like I want my name to be in Vogue. Really was never interested in that, because to me that was just a world that was so far removed. Like, as you were talking earlier. From where I've come from and who I am, right, or who I thought I was. But I soon woke up to it, and I realised, right, that maybe my mindset was a little too small, right, and I built up this picture, right, of how things were and who people were, and maybe was judging people, right, for the wishes they had in life, right, and I think that for me was a real eye opener, because I realised that there are actually some very cool people, right, out there, regardless of where they're from or what their parents did for a living. So it really kind of opened my mind up, in a great way, actually. Because I think in England, we kind of we have a thing where it's nothing like America, for instance, right? Like America, I think for me has been the most instrumental country in my life, really, in terms of my career. Right, and actually being appreciated and being financially reciprocated. Right.
Oh, okay.
Right. Seriously, that does not exist if you come from, like a council estate, which is what you would call the ghetto. Right. It doesn't exist. Right. And we are such an old country that there are a lot of traditions and a lot of mindsets that I don't like, which is why I personally love America, because I think it's an amazing country, and I think a lot of people are quite hard on it, right? And I don't agree with that, actually. I think America for me has been one of those places where people are very open. And they're interested, right, in ideas, right, and they can see the relevance in those ideas, and they know how to market those ideas, and we don't. We're useless. We're like a little island,
Right. Okay.
So for me, I love going to the States, and and also the thing that I found really quite interesting, right, which does not exist here, right, is, you know, you may have an idea, right, and someone will go, oh, I know a guy who does this, right, and you should talk to that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll hook you up with a guy, right, and you get to meet the guy, and the guy will go, yeah, I really love what you got, I really love you, but right now I'm not in a position where I can do, but I know someone that might be really interested in what you've got to say, and they'll make a call for you. You know,
Okay.
like that really does not happen here. Like it really doesn't. You know, so I think that kind of formality that we have being British or English is very old, right? And I you know, I don't love it personally, and I am English, right? And I know that there are a lot of English people like me, right, that think the way I think as well, right? And you know, that's why I've always loved going to the States, right? And I loved living in New York, you know, like absolutely. I thought it was fantastic, you know.
Was there someone you worked with or a company that kind of solidified that concept that you have about the United States and being open? You know, it was
Clavin Klein.
Yeah.
Clavin.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Clavin Klein. He gave us. He plucked us out of nowhere, right, and gave Craig a job. And we were doing campaigns, right? Literally, like we were doing like The Face and ID and Kate Moss.
Yep.
And there was that explosion of Kate, right, when she came out, and we all kind of, you know, grew up together. There was like, you know, Kate Moss, Craig McDean, David Sims, Glenn Luchford, and we were just getting all these like seriously like killer jobs, great, crazy jobs. Like I remember like when we used to travel because we used to travel, and we'd all travel together. And there was a very big studio in Paris called Pinup that had this massive canteen, and it was full of like, you know, all these very famous French zhuzhy bougie people, right, in the fashion industry, which goes back to what you were saying. And they hated us. You could literally feel like they really did not like us because we'd like stolen all their jobs, like literally.
Right.
Like,
yeah, I bet.
You could just feel it. And I said to Pat one day, I said, I can't eat there, man. It's like, you know, like the food's just not going down. You know, like it's not going. I can't eat there. You know, you know what I mean. It was a crazy time, and that was like the 2000 era. You know, like around 2000s.
Yep.
Very late 90s, 2000s. You know, and you know, and going to the States is a completely different thing altogether. I was like, oh my God, like they know what they're doing here. It's organised. Oh my God. You know, there's food.
That's really interesting. Like
literally, like we were used to like, you know, going to a cafe, getting a cheese sandwich and a can of Sprite. That was literally what, you know, our food was, or it was a pizza takeaway, right? Not like you guys. Oh, there's a bit. Oh, yeah, there's the couscous, and there's, you know.
My gosh.
You know what I'm saying, right?
You know, the craft services is unbelievable.
You know what I mean? It's like a World Food Board. You know,
I lived on that for so long. You know, I would be assisting. You know, and the hairdresser I was assisting would be like, "Hey, like take a to-go box. Like bring as much food as you can. Like this is gonna help you live while you assist." You know, it was amazing. But I didn't realize that was a predominantly American mentality.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really, really was. I mean, you know, like, I didn't even know what sushi was, right, till I went to the States.
Wow.
And, you know, and back then, I have to tell you, right, British cuisine was pretty bad.
It's come a long way.
Oh, my God. It's like it's a completely different world now, right? But, then it was like, it was crazy.
Yeah.
It's like the world.
So
literally.
You started coming to the United States a lot in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. That's when it was happening. Yeah. It was an interesting time for culture and music, especially, in New York, the late 90s, early 2000s, and the music that was happening. And I wonder, what the scene was like for fashion, for hair, obviously specifically, and what you guys were doing. Did that feel like a kinetic time?
Well, for me, right, at that time, I loved coming to New York, right? And like I can remember going to Joe's Pub in New York. I don't know if you ever went there. It was like really
actually.
And and where else did we? Where we used to go to, like the Tunnel Club.
Heard of it.
That was an amazing time for like hip hop for me.
Yeah.
Right, that kind of boom bap era, right?
Uh-huh.
Where you'd be walking, you'd be walking down the East Village and you'd be hearing like like the RZA, like Liquid Swords album just banging out and stuff like, and you were just like, wow, like this is incredible, right? Like incredible.
Yep.
So for me, that was a really interesting time, a very, very interesting time, and a lot of bars in the East Village, and there was a lot going on, and people were making stuff, and and street art was like incredible. Like everything, it was just like crazy. It was a crazy time. It was beautiful. And I mean,
I really think
fashion at that point in time was really kind of quite nuts as well, right?
Yeah.
People had just come out of grunge, right? And we wanted to see more stuff, and we were like experimenting and playing with hair, like and doing some really quite pushing it,
Yeah. Well, it's crazy because coming out of grunge, like going into the early 2000s, you kind of had that whole, especially in New York, like that whole kind of garage rock kind of resurgence. And then you had kind of the electro clash thing going on. I was working for Tony and Guy in the early 2000s. Like I started in 2000. And
in where? In New York?
No, in Dallas, Texas, actually.
Oh my God. Right.
Yeah, that's where I'm from. And so, when Tony and Guy came to the United States, they kind of landed in Dallas.
Yeah.
So I kind of grew up seeing them around, and they were kind of the motivational aspect of getting me into hair because they were doing really cool stuff. It was the hair that I wanted to do.
Right.
At that time. So, and they were doing a lot of that stuff. They were doing a lot of the mullets and all that stuff at the time.
Right. All that really attractive stuff, right?
Wait, say that again?
That really attractive stuff.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I know. It was a rude awakening when I realized I had
bad taste done with good taste, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. It worked out. It worked out for a little while. For sure. When did you?
Go on.
What's that?
Go on.
No. I want to hear what you're going to say.
I was just gonna say. I think that was a really good, a really good time of experimenting, and I think that was probably just predates, right? Apple taking the world over, really.
Yeah, sure. Very true.
Right, and so you can see when you look at an era like that, right, and you look at where we are now, right. People were not afraid to be doing things that were maybe a little bit more primal, right, and off than they are now.
Yep.
Right. It seemed that way to me now, looking back on it.
Yeah.
There was more freedom there, and the minds, I think, were open.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think, right, I think things were a little more limited then, which I think made you more resourceful creatively.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
You had to find a way, right? It wasn't like, oh, I can buy this,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, or if you wanted to research an idea, right, you would have to go to a library, right? Like now, you can just get on, anything, right, on the internet, find whatever you want. The only problem is, right, it doesn't give you the history; it just gives you the visuals of those times, right? And and I know, right, that whenever you look at something, you have to look at it in context, right? Yeah. And I don't think it contextualizes a lot of things, which is the kind of the pitfall of it, really.
Yeah. Yeah. It is, man. I think art is in a weird place, and I think, maybe not all for the bad, but, when I see people, even if it's not what I'm interested in, when I see people pushing things, I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy that they're doing it just because it makes somebody uncomfortable.
Right? You can appreciate it, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, you said one time, I read this, that you said you're not so much of a hairdresser, but you're a head dresser.
Yeah.
Right. And it was kind of in the context of you kind of looking at hair almost more as a textile.
Yeah.
Right.
A fiber, yeah.
Yeah. When did that occur to you? Was there a point where you were like, I've stepped outside of my box. Like now hair is this different thing to me?
I think it was a very gradual process, to be really honest with you. And I think I only realised that, I think, when I did that interview, to be really honest with you. Yeah. And prior to that, I was kind of up for a hairdressing award, right? And they wanted me to present these pictures, and I was like, and everything that I was really into, there was hair involved, but it was not 100% hair, right? And what you would call hairdressing. And I realised, right, that I'd been incorporating a lot of other materials in hair and finding ways of putting them in to create something, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of strange. And then I thought, well, why am I even entered for this award?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like it's crazy. I mean, like, you can talk to a lot of people. What I find are ideas that are inspiring, that maybe sit on the head or connect with the head. Like a few years ago, I did a Margiela show with John. And we were talking about this, and I love talking about anything, right? And the concept for the show, and he's like, I really want them to feel like they've kind of dressed in haste, right? Like they've got out of the shower, put a coat on, right, and it's just done, and they're out the door. And he's like, he's a visionary, and I said to him, could it look like they'd washed their hair but forgot to rinse the suds out of their hair?
Nice.
Eyes just went like lit up, like could really look like that, and having the freedom, right, to just be spontaneous and allowed, right, to express yourself and to be appreciated for that is like an amazing feeling.
Sure.
Like, you really feel like you're doing something, even if you're stepping out of a boundary. When we were like getting shampoo and we were like whisking it up in buckets, creating all this foam and throwing it on the model's hair as they were. I mean, it was great. It was amazing. So right. You know what I mean, or even sending them down the catwalk with foils in their hair.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean, or like looking like they'd been tinted, right, and they just run out with colour on their heads. Like we did all of that, and
yeah,
that was like wow, we're really doing something very new here. And I love that idea, especially when you probably do a hairstyle, right, and you're going through a process, right, and you've not finished your look.
Mm-hmm.
You just go, hey, I don't think I need to finish this because to me this looks like really cool. Yeah. So you're actually presenting work that's finished but looks as if it's been in the process. It's been in the process. The process isn't finished, but visually, right, it looks really beautiful and interesting.
Yeah.
So I think when you work with people like that allow you this, well, they want you to have freedom actually because they're intrigued by what you can bring to the table. But having said that, right, I'm as a hairdresser, right, whenever I work with anyone, I'm extremely flexible, right. Yeah. I don't go in there and stamp my foot down and have a hissy fit and go it's my way or the highway, or go I'm not doing that. Mm-hmm. Like, I'll never do that ever. Yeah. Right. And I'm very respectful of people, and I love hearing what they have to say and learning from them.
What's the balance? But what's the balance between kind of like getting something you're satisfied with and being flexible at the same time?
Do you know what? Because I probably work in a very different way.
Yeah.
The gratification for me is really enjoying the process.
Nice.
Like I can never put anything on the street as a website if I've not had a good time. Like I can't even look at it. Like I can look at a shoot, right, and I get a sense of what the environment must have been like on the day.
Yeah, sure.
You really do. When I think you're that closely connected with something and so involved, invested, like intellectually, emotionally, and I do put a lot of work in, right, and I am extremely critical of what I do, even though people would probably not know that I am, but I am,
Yeah.
I never want to leave a job feeling like I've half-assed it ever. In whatever sense of the imagination that means, right?
Do you find that the majority of the time, or maybe all the time, that when you leave a job, you are completely satisfied? Is that something you make sure of? Because I don't know if I'm ever satisfied.
No, well, I'm in agreement with you there, right? I don't think you ever will be satisfied, because if you were satisfied, you probably wouldn't be doing what you're doing.
Right.
You would be bored, right? So I think what you do, right, is this is just what I do, right? It may be different. It's different for everyone, I'm sure, right? Yeah. But for me, I look at the environment. I look at the storyboard. I look at the chemistry on the shoot of the people.
Yeah.
And the quality of photographer. Right, and I just weigh up the pros and cons, right, and just say, could I have done?
Is this before you
in a given situation?
Right.
No, probably not. Right. Am I happy with what I've done? Yeah, I'm a good 93% there. Right, but not really. Like, I think all the things I've ever done that I've been most happy with have come from mistakes.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah. Is there one that comes to mind that you could share?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of mistakes that I've kind of I've made, but because Trevor gave me such a good training, I've always managed to find a creative solution that was even better.
Yeah.
Right. And now I don't even look at mistakes as mistakes. Right. I look at them as divine guidance. Right. Really, like without wanting to be too to sound like a hippie, right?
No,
But
I mean,
I believe things happen for a reason, and I think sometimes you're not aware of them. And I think sometimes if you process those things, you can end up going down a really wrong path. And I think once you've made a mistake, you have to let intuition kick in, right? And I think that is always the thing that has been my saving grace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
I do. I
mean, I make mistakes every day. Like, literally, I do.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lesson to take into life, beyond hair. I think that is important.
Yeah, really, and I don't think you should be afraid of making mistakes. I mean, obviously, right, what I do, right, is always going to be rectifiable, right, because I'm not cutting anyone's hair. I'm not really colouring it. If I'm going to colour it, I'll colour a wig, or get a colourist in to do it, right? An idea, but like everything I do really does come from a place of love and empathy. Well, it really does.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from anywhere else, and I'm always kind to people because that's how I'm made, and it's how I like to be treated, with respect and kindness. So I just live my life that way, really, and interact with people in that way. And I think, I think if you do go into shoots or you go into shows with like really good energy, I think it's quite infectious.
Oh man, it is so like perfectly disarming.
How you react to any situation, right?
Yeah.
Like you great. And I don't think people realise how powerful they are, right, or how powerful they can be if they're coming from a great place, right, a place of integrity. I don't think they do.
Yeah, that's very empowering. Really, really great to hear. I think it's refreshing in our world too. I think a lot of people kind of default to being a dictator, or default to like, I'm here and you're here. And I don't think you get the best out of people in that regard.
I think that's a massive trait of insecurity.
Yeah.
Right, and narcissism.
Just a little bit.
Just a touch, right? It's like really weird. Like last week when I was doing the Met, right? I was actually doing a shoot with another really famous hairdresser. Right, he used to be a hairdresser, Luigi. Do you know Luigi?
Yeah.
He's become a photographer now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think I knew that. Actually.
I worked with him on the shoot, and he's a really great hairdresser, like amazing hairdresser.
Yeah. Totally.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm working with Louis, right? And we had such a great time.
Yeah.
And the whole couple of days it was just like everyone was loving what they were doing, and the results were beautiful, like really bloody beautiful and very special. And
will we see that somewhere soon?
Yeah, it's actually been out. It was actually I was doing the hair of a young lady who's probably one of the richest women in the world.
I must know her.
Natasha Pua?
I don't know.
It's like a multi-billionaire, and she's a multi-billionaire personally.
Wow.
And she's like an extremely beautiful Indian lady, and if you look on my Instagram, I think I've got some stuff on there of her, and John made an outfit for her, Galliano.
Oh, amazing!
And she just looks incredible, and and we just did some really great pictures of her, like really great. Never looked like that, ever. And she was quite shocked that she could look like that.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, everything was just really right. It felt really, it felt right.
So is that is that a situation where Eugene would feel a little bit intimidated, or not, or does that not come into your world at all?
Doesn't come into my world, I'm afraid.
No, that's great. I mean, that's such a gift.
Not really, because I always figure, like you're booked to do something, right? Someone obviously wants you for what you do, right? You've had numerous Zoom calls with them, conversations. You've spoken to wig makers. You've spoken to Luigi. You know John. You can build. I think with all of those elements, I think you can build a pretty strong picture, right, of where you feel things should be going, and then once you've built that picture, then you have to take into consideration, the chemistry involved, right, and the logistics, right, and time frames and stuff like that. And I think once you've done that, you've got 90% of an idea. But the really funny thing, though, right, and it really is funny, right, and you think, all I need to do is add that other 10%. Yeah. But when you're adding that 10%, you realise that 10% is the 90%.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
If that makes any, and it sounds quite odd, right? But it's actually a lot bigger than you imagine it to be.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a little bit like walking into like I was talking to a journalist once about this, and he was saying, when John came back and he started working for Margiela, and he said, and you've been doing this a while, Eugene. Like, how do you feel about it? And John's a very distinguished designer, and and he's been doing it for a long time. And I said, for me, I am so scared. And he said, why? I said, because he used to work with Julian Dees, right? I'm like, they're really big boots to fill. I'm sorry. Like, really big boots to fill, right? And, when I look at Julien, right, I mean, like, to me, he's like a hair god, right? Yeah. And I can see his work and I can just spot it a mile off. I go, that was Julien. And, and I think when you look at someone like that and you look at that kind of work, you can feel the passion, right, and the love that's been put into it, right? You can feel it, right? And I don't think there are a lot of people like that around. I think they're very, very rare. But I think when you look at something like that, you just go, wow, or I did. So I was really scared. And then I thought, I must be here for a reason, right? Yeah. And the reason's not to be Julien, that's to be me, right? Yep. So I need to be confident in the fact that I can pull it off. I'm not sure where it's going, but, I need to be excited about it. And then I went to Paris for a meeting. And, I think you pick up on all of these little things. And John made a dress from shells. Then there was a big face of shells. I don't know if you've ever seen the outfit, but it was red chrome. It was like a red dress with red chrome top. And it was like huge seashells that were put together to create a face, right? And it looked really surreal. Yeah. Really surreal. And I looked at that and it was like, and because I've come from art school, right? So I know quite a bit about art and history. Right? One of my favourite painters ever, it was an Italian guy from the 16th century called Arcimboldo. Okay. And he used to take elements of nature, like he would do a still life, of winter fruit, right? But it would be a portrait of a person. They'd be configured together in a way that it was a person.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And I just looked at the dress and I was like, I said, oh my God, it's like Archimboldo. And he went, you know Archimboldo?
That's great.
And I thought, oh, right, the minds have met, right? We're in a good place here, right? And he's like, Archimboldo. And I said, yeah, you know, like, and he's like, oh, I know who Archimboldo is. And I was like, oh, yeah. He's like, oh, it's like, oh, you know your reference, don't you? And I said, well, you know, it's like an unusual reference to be putting into this context, but yeah, I love it. Yeah, I totally get it. You know, and you know, and then we really hit it off, and I kind of understood everything as clear as light. You know, then.
So just getting into the thought process there, like you know, you see this, you have the reference in your head of the artist. You know, where does the hair go at that point? Because the dress is such a focal point.
Yeah, but you see, the thing about fashion, right? I think, especially with incredible design clothes, I think it's really important to understand, right, that there is a person wearing them, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, right, nothing looks worse than a dress that's wearing a person, right? The person has to be as big as the dress. The person has to wear the clothes, not the clothes wear them.
Yeah.
So that's where you kind of like you dig deep into create a character, a person that would wear that kind of thing, right? Which is where your imagination kicks in, right? And you look at things like shine, texture, proportion. Does the dress feel like it's come from another world? Does it feel like there's a historical reference? Is a reference technological? You know, and you just find a way, right? And there is no foolproof system, right? It's just like you just feel it and imagine it. You know, it's a little bit like when someone says to you, "Oh, you know, like, I really want you to be creative. Like, you know, I want to see something I've never seen before." And you go, "Yeah, great, cool." And they go, "Well, what are your references?" And you go, "Well, but it hasn't been done before, right?" there really aren't any references. I can tell you what's going on in my head and help you formulate a picture in your mind's eye, right? But I don't know. I do know what to do, right? And that's the beginning of an idea. I can play around on that idea on a head of hair and a block and show you where I'm going with it. But I can't pull something from the internet and go, well, the front's going to be a bit like that and it's going to be this. I don't know.
Right.
You know, and I think the funny thing is, I think like we all have, right? We all have to let go of control at some point in time and let things unfold and build. And I think if you're working with really respectful, creative, intelligent people with common sense, they understand that, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, right? You should never work with anyone whose work you don't love or you don't respect.
Does that mean you have to really vet? Like, I'm assuming that, you know, young successful designers want to work with you a lot. So I mean, are you pretty selective?
I prefer to work with younger designers than older designers. I have to tell you, right? Yeah. And it's really weird because I think, or from what I've been told, like I've got a very young energy, right? I'm not like an old person, right? You know, been there, seen it, done it, got the t-shirt. I'm not like that in the slightest. So I'm always very excited, right, to be able to work with people that are as excited about what they do as me.
Yeah, right? Sure.
And I think, Ray, when you've been doing something for a period of time or a long period of time, I think it's really easy to be very jaded, right?
Yeah.
You know, about it and very methodical in your thinking and a bit cold and a bit calculated, and I'm just not that at all.
Yep.
Right, I'm really not. You know, and so I always end up working with these kids. Like I could be their father, like literally, like like they're half my age, right?
Yep.
Even younger sometimes, and I'm like, oh God. And and I always kind of make a joke out of it, and they go, oh, like we really don't want to work with anyone else. Like no one's as much fun as you. Like you're so crazy, And then what? Because I really am myself, right? On a job, I'm not, Yeah.
Do you feel like a hair legend?
No, not at all. No.
I mean, it's pretty unbelievable. It's pretty unbelievable. And
no, I don't feel like that at all. The thing that keeps me going is the fact that I feel I'm not good enough. Actually,
what a valuable feeling.
Well, I just think there's always room for improvement, right?
Sure.
And I'm not really someone that sort of just wants to go through the motions.
Yeah.
Right. It's not really what I'm about. You can be about that if that's your shtick, right? If that's your deal, for sure. Be what you want to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it doesn't get me out of bed in the morning. Hell no.
Yep.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Do you ever need like a hard reset creatively, or you feel like?
I don't know the difference. I don't know the difference between my life and my career. I don't know where they start, where they begin, how they mix. I don't know.
I think that might be the ultimate.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I honestly, I really don't. Like kids laugh at me, right? Because we'll be out, right, and all of a sudden, right, I'll be staring at the roots of a tree, and they go, "Oh, Dad's off." Literally, I'm like one of those people that could look at a white wall, right, and enjoy looking at a white wall. I could look at a white wall for hours and have absolutely no problem with that, and really enjoy it.
Right.
I don't know if that's a guy thing, or
it could be.
I don't know, like fishing. But I could. I'm very happy with being that way. Like I don't have a problem with it, and I really don't know where the line is drawn. Like what does a job mean? Is a job something you do because you want to make money to have a certain lifestyle? Yeah, it can be. Is a job, what is it? I don't know. I've never had a job, right? I don't feel like I've ever had a job.
Wow.
Right. So for me, I guess I'm coming from like a very different place, right? I think I fall into a very small percentage of people, right, that get tremendous satisfaction out of what they're doing. Right.
I think if people could
imagine what it must feel like to leave home at 7 o'clock in the morning and do an hour of travelling, right? Start work at 8:15 and leave at 5, and not enjoy or love those 9 hours of work. I can't imagine what that must feel like. That must be horrible. It must be the worst feeling in the world. One of the worst feelings in the world. I can't imagine it.
And it might be the more common thing, unfortunately.
I think it is, though, unfortunately, and I think, that's really sad. But I guess those people live for the weekends, right? And they get something else in a different way. than we probably do. I mean, I don't know. But I wouldn't want to be that person.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't.
I feel like there's room for a paradigm shift, even if, even just working in the salon can feel, a little repetitive sometimes. But I think, if you can take what you said and remember that what you do it's creative. If you're looking at every client as an expression of your art, then you're going to remember why you got into this, assuming that's why you got into it,
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's a beautiful thing to keep in mind.
But you know what though, right, Clint? I mean, it's even like it's like those like little subtle things in a hairstyle you can get so much pleasure out of doing.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's those little touches, and you just go, hit the nail on the head there, right? You know what I mean?
Sure.
There are those little things that probably are invisible to a lot of people, even the person you're doing it to.
Yeah.
But I think you can always find something in something that gives you pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been able to do that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Did you come from a family of artists?
Hell no.
No, not even remotely.
My dad used to work in a Turkish restaurant as a manager.
Okay.
And my mum was an accountant.
Okay. Yeah.
Assistant an accountant. Was the secretary of an accountant. Yeah. So no.
They saved it all for you.
Yeah, very humble beginnings. Very humble beginnings.
Was Turkish culture a big part of your life growing up?
A big part of my life that I ran away from.
Okay. Yeah.
And the older I get, the more I realise I think like a European, but I definitely have a very very warm-blooded temperament.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like I do feel things quite deeply, and I'm very passionate.
Yeah.
And I hate cold weather. Hate cold weather.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know, but I've always considered myself as culturally as an English person, but a person that's has a mixed gene pool.
Yeah, it's great. That's great, man. I could talk to you for hours. I think we should talk about the Wig Academy a little bit.
Oh my God! Yeah, shit. Yeah.
I think that's should be said.
Shall I paint the story for you?
Man, I would love that. I would love to hear about it because it's still like relatively elusive, a little bit elusive still.
Right. Okay. So, I met Pablo about 10 years ago. I do believe about 10 years ago, and I was doing a show in London Fashion Week for a designer called Giles. Oh my God, I forgot. I want to say Giles Peterson, but he's a DJ. My God. Anyway, I was doing a show in London for Giles, right? And Pablo was part of a team because Tony and Guy was sponsoring the show.
Okay.
And Pablo was a Tony and Guy hairdresser. And I looked at him, and he looks a little bit like, I don't know if you've seen what he looks like, right? He looks a little bit
I've seen pictures, yeah.
Salvador Dali, right? But like a caveman, right? Lived in Miami in the 80s, right? And I was like, well, that guy's kind of interesting looking. And I just ended up talking with him, and he was like, oh, like if you really need another hand or you need anything else. And I thought, yeah, I really like this guy. He's cool. Mm-hmm. So I kind of rung him up like a few months later when it was the next show season. And I was like, would you like to assist me? I'd had a first assistant previously. And Pablo was working with us for a couple of years on the shows, and my first assistant went his own way, and I thought, who on earth am I going to get as an assistant? And I was like, oh, Pablo. I was like, oh, but he's doing his own thing. He's probably not going to be interested. So, and I thought, oh, I'll just call him up.
Mm.
And I just called him up and I said, would you like to be my first assistant? And he said, yeah, I'd love to. That'd be amazing. Literally, when do I start? And
Nice.
And we just hit it off really well. He was like a really funny guy. I loved the fact that, there was never an uncomfortable silence when we were kind of, we were in the room. He was very engaged as me. And I thought, oh my God, I met someone who's like me, which is really weird because I don't normally meet people as nuts as me about things. And we really, really hit it off. And he was my assistant for about 4 years. But
Nice.
we just remained in contact because he couldn't assist me out because COVID happened.
Right.
And then he decided that he wanted to, do this online educational thing. And I've always been a huge fan of what he does, right, and how he does it. And, I've been very supportive of what he's been doing.
Yeah.
And he asked me, he said, do you want to do a course? And I said, yeah, well, Pablo, you've done a lot of stuff on your course, right? There's like, you're not giving me a lot of space to work in, right? But
sure.
Let me think about this, right, and see how it can work. Over a year, we've been having conversations about it. How's it? What do you think would be a good thing to do? Where are the wigs coming from? I'm kind of into this kind of idea. How do you feel about that? Have you got anything like that on your course? So we've literally been. It started off as a very loose conversation, like most things that kind of end up materialising. And over a period of time, over 6 months, we kind of built a picture of where we feel we could create a very different class.
Yeah.
Right. And I said to Pablo, the thing for me is I hate being told what to do. And he said, yeah, well, what to do? And I said, so, I really think we need to be thinking about how we change the dialogue, right, of student and teacher.
Interesting. Okay.
The dialogue has to change. I really feel like, we've entered this new time, and as I said, and things just feel really quite old for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I don't think there's enough flexibility in education. I don't think people talk about feeling or visual judgment. I don't think they talk about things in a fashion sense, in a beauty sense, enough. I think our industry is very geared towards technique and just cold technique, and I don't like that. I find it really boring. It doesn't interest me, So I think we need to really be thinking about how we can change things from an educational perspective, how we can add to something, make it bigger, more encompassing, more inspiring, and I think the problem I've always had with hairdressing, right, is it's always been very, very proportionate and mathematical.
Yeah.
And I've always been taught hard technique, right, because I worked with Trevor and he was as Sassoons, right, so I've learned Sassoon way, right, and I never ever found that interesting.
Yeah.
You know, I always thought whenever I saw a seminar or something like that, people were just making techniques up just for the sake of it. And
Sure.
really, did they look good? Did the women look beautiful? Did they look interesting? Probably not. Right. So,
Yep.
or to my mind, right? You know.
Yeah. Sure.
I thought, well, you know, what would the benefits of doing this be?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then it kind of really dawned on me, right, that my career has come full circle. Literally, I started off in the trade and I veered off, right?
Yeah.
And I came back again with another skill set. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
that other skill set's the thing that needs to have some light shine on it.
Yeah. Sure.
You know? And that was it, you know? And I said, you know, like, we need to be thinking about making these videos like, you know, like in a gaming sense.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be like we're interactive, right? You know, or you're watching Formula One.
Yeah.
You're not watching someone with, you know, a hand tattoo and a big old pair of scissors clunking away with the wrist, you know, like, you know, there needs to be something else. You know, we need to change the environment of where things are being shot. You know, and we started with a lot of ideas, right? And I was saying, you know, like, because I'm a session hairdresser, like, I don't work in a salon, right? Or I don't always work in a studio. I work on location.
Mm-hmm.
You know, would it be good to shoot a video in a really unusual place, like in a factory or in a garage, like a car garage, cars, you know, or a dealership, or a laboratory, or just somewhere.
Sure.
That wasn't like so like, you know, like generic and homogenized, right, and sterile, right?
Yep.
Wouldn't it be good to do that? You know, and he was like, yeah. So, you know, like, we've taken into account a lot of we put a lot of consideration into two things. You know, and there are a lot of things that I can't really talk about that hopefully will be really surprising. But the one thing that we decided that we really wanted to do was we really wanted to talk about creating a certain look, right? And then coming back to that look and looking at it and seeing how we can evolve that look.
Awesome.
So not only are you getting, you know, like, there's one look that I'm doing, right, but it evolves into 4 looks.
Okay.
Right, it's not just one hairstyle.
Right.
Right, it's a technique that builds and other techniques are added to it to create some quite different stuff. You know, and I think for me that's it. I love the idea of, you know, being able to do something and it growing into something completely different.
I love the idea of demystifying, you know, kind of this realm, you know, for new hairdressers that are interested in wig work. You know, it's just not something that is easily accessed, you know, and I do think that this can kind of tee off a whole realm of education, and I'm excited to see it. Yeah, really excited.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's, you know, like, we, you know, like, every 2 or 3 days we spend a good hour on the phone. You know, because I always find that, you know, like, sometimes, you know, we have all these conversations, right, and they're really positive and everything else, and then I'm like, why did I not say that? You know, I forgot about that, and I need to talk about that, because if I talk about that, that could, you know, and I think that's it. You know, it's become, the dialogue about the course has become more intense and more exciting as time's moving on, right? You know, like, we're even perming wigs and stuff. You know, like, we're doing stuff to wigs that's interesting. We're not doing a blowout and a set.
Sure.
Right? And, you know, we are doing stuff that's not been seen, hopefully. I think, you know.
I think so too. Is this going to be a continuation? Like it's going to continue into more and more curriculum, or no?
It could do, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, like I was saying, you know, you have to start, right, and that's just what we're doing at the moment. We're just starting, and you know, because it's taken a year so far, right, to get to this point, we're ironing out a lot of things, right, and we're learning a lot as we're going along, right, which is great. You know, like for me, that's really exciting. You know, it's not like systematic.
Yep.
Well, it is, but it you know, it has. I think it has a lot more depth to it, right? And you know, and I think there's a whole philosophy behind hairdressing that's not technical.
Oh man, absolutely.
You know, do you know what I mean? And I've done one of these things before, and I wanted it to be very different, and I kind of I wanted to do it in front of a live audience.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted the live audience to be my teachers.
Oh wow!
Right, because I wanted to make it really difficult for me. Right?
Man,
like,
good for you.
I really wanted to be put into a corner to see whether, you know, whether it could work, you know, and you know, and it was a 2-hour seminar, but it went on for 6 hours.
Oh my God!
And no one wanted to go. Right, and you know, members of the audience that were coming up that were doing bits, and I'd be like Angelo Seminara was there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be like, Angelo, come up, right? And I would talk to people in the audience and ask them questions. You know, what do you feel about it? And we would have conversations. Right? So it was really a event, soiree, demonstration, workshop. It was like everything all together. You know,
was it recorded?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it accessible? Because that seems like a dream. Like that seems like.
Yeah, we probably don't want to mention it, but it was like Hair Club Live, I think it was.
Okay, I'll try to find it.
Right, you know, and it was it was great.
Yeah.
You know, and the funny thing was, Pablo was my assistant at that time, right? And we kind of spoke a lot about it. So we've already gone through a process, right, of you know, of learning.
Yeah.
Right? I learned so much from that, right? And I learned stuff that I didn't think I wasn't even aware of.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's the thing. Really, the very basic thing I learned, right, was that if I'm not excited about it, how on earth am I expecting people to be? How on earth am I ever going to expect anyone to be excited about it?
Yeah, sure.
You know, so realistically, you know, like you have to please yourself, right? And I'm hoping, right, with every part of my body crossed, right, that it's going to be something that's very different.
Yeah. Well, man, I'm excited to see it.
Like a lot of traction. I was like, oh my God. Right, you know, like into the hundreds of thousands of views, right? I mean, it's not even, you know, I don't know what that means, right? Really, but you know, any kind of interest is a good thing, right?
Well, people are excited. I've had multiple of my mentors throughout my career calling me to be like, hey, what do you know about the Wig Academy? Like, you know, what's going on? How do we sign up? Like all this stuff. So people are excited across the board. So, including myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will also offer an alternative way of looking at wigs and
That's
styling.
great.
And I think it will be very good for, hairdressers, especially hairdressers that might be doing shows and stuff like that and presentations and stuff.
Yeah.
I think it could be really quite interesting for them.
But also, I think there's room for wigs to come back to the everyday world too, and I think that's a really cool concept. So I'm excited to see. Yeah, I'm excited to see the fire that it starts, and I'm stoked that you and Pablo are doing this. I'm excited to see it.
I mean, like we're literally working every day on it. Right?
Yeah.
But it's great. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, I left you that message on WhatsApp, and I'm like, yeah, I'm on WhatsApp, Pablo, but I've got so many messages, I'm trying to find it.
Yeah.
Like literally, it's like, so much scrolling, and I try and limit my time on the phone, right?
As you should. When we started Lost Hairdressers, it was at that. I mean, it was before Instagram became Instagram. Well, it was before Instagram, period. But really, what I wanted to do was kind of expose, the people behind the scenes of fashion, and now that's not so rare anymore, right? But at the beginning, that wasn't seen, and that was the focus. But it's cool to see. As wrong as social media has gotten a lot of things, the things that it's gotten right, where it has exposed a world where it's more accessible. So somebody from Dallas, Texas can see a way to get to Eugene or whatever, I just think
or get out
it's
of their
really
present situation, right? Or look at their situation in a different light, right?
Yep.
And it's a little bit like, it's a little bit like I remember when I first started working with John, right? And I thought, yeah, I know this technique, I know that period of time, I know this, I know that, I know this, I know that. And then I started working with him, and it felt a little bit like Narnia. It felt like I knew my home, right? I knew my trade, I knew everything about it, right? And then I just opened a cupboard, right? And there was another world inside there.
Yeah.
And I was
right.
like, what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like, oh, and then everything just kind of got bigger and surrounded me. I was like, wow. Okay, like I can do this, right? I can do that. Wouldn't this be amazing? So if there's any way, right, I can bring that to someone or make them feel like that. I mean, ultimately, right, that's my intention, right, to be able to do that, to share that excitement, to be able to open that door, right, and like let people step through into a world they never knew that they could exist in, right, or create, right. So, that for me is it's where all the excitement comes, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So, that's just what our intentions are anyway.
Yeah. It's beautiful, man. It is a beautiful thing.
Just offer an alternative, right? It doesn't. I'm not saying, or to propose something, right? I'm not saying I'm going to get it right. I'm not saying I'm going to get it wrong. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to try and do something that I don't know, that I haven't seen, and that's it. And hopefully that those balls will get it through, right? Hopefully.
Yeah.
I don't know, right? But it's worth trying. Worth trying to do something, I think.
Well, we are here as Lost Hairdressers to help. We're definitely excited and behind you guys. It's really cool. Yeah.
Well,
it's
that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Pablo shared with you.
Honestly, this is the only thing that I have from this, Eugene, is I got a message from the Wig Academy. I didn't know who I was talking to.
Wow.
And so that's really the only communication I've had. It was that, and then I heard from you directly. So I was trying to figure out if you were actually part of it, or you were just doing a thing for them, or
No,
so this is all.
I always do things in a very personal, a personable way, right? And I always have like these kind of like long-lasting friendships with people and connections with people, and this was never anything that was premeditated, right? It is a conversation, right, that has evolved over a period of time, right? And grown into where we are now. You know, if it could grow any further, I'd love to nurture that with Pablo. You know, and maybe we could create a signature line of wigs.
Yeah, absolutely.
A new way of adding to hair. You know, who knows?
Yep.
Right. You know, we don't know yet at the moment. We're both experimenting and playing around with ideas at the moment, right? And once we're done with, you know, playing around with those ideas and actually putting them out there, right? And looking at the feedback that comes back from that, I'm sure we're going to find that really quite inspiring, right? And hopefully that will lead us on to another project.
Yep.
Right?
Well, for the audience, that's priceless, man. You know, I think that we're always, you know, kind of looking for that thing to help us get outside of our routine, outside of our box, you know, and to push.
Yeah, you know, it's like looking at it as if it's, you know, like I always go, you're probably never ever going to do this, right? But there will be a little idea in there that you can apply to something, right, and find your own way of using it. But you know, just because it's like not an everyday thing doesn't mean that it's not valid. We all need a hair holiday, right? We all need to go away, right, and you know, experience something and see something different in a different environment. We do, you know.
We all need Narnia.
Yeah, it inspires you, right, and it cleanses your palate, right? You know. You know, any knowledge is a good thing, and you know, it's just, you know, you need to know what to do with it. Who knows, right? This could be like this could start off, you know, like a seminar. We could probably travel and do very sort of specialist workshops, stuff like that. You know, we could create competitions. You know, this could be like a really interesting way of building a new network of people, of creating a new team, an agency. I mean, who knows, right? I mean, this could grow into something really quite amazing, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be just this, right? It can be in a lot of ways, right? And we're not really going to know how it's going to grow until we do it and we get some feedback. And I'm sure we'll find the feedback really inspiring. You know, and even you know, like any kind of feedback, positive or negative, right? It's all good. You know, it all goes into the pot. You know, so I'm very engaged, right, in what I'm doing. You know, and I'm really up
I think there's plenty of room for that. I mean, there's plenty of room for all of what you just said, you know, and I'm looking forward to what you guys put out.
You know, Clint, do you go to seminars and stuff like that? Do you see a lot of workshops?
Honestly, no, I don't. I mean, I'm 24 years into my career. I used to work a lot of workshops and do that stuff, and I think that for me running Lost Hairdressers, as well as actually having a job as a hairdresser behind the chair and stuff, it's been difficult for me to kind of, you know, make the time. And also, there's not always things that I'm drawn to go learn. Like that I'm willing to invest in because it's going to be something perhaps I haven't seen or from someone that I haven't got to learn from. So, you know, in this instance with you guys, I mean, it is absolutely something that I think myself and many people I know would invest in because, you know, I've never seen or been to a class, you know, on wigs. You know, I've learned things on set, but it would be invaluable, you know, to have. Long-winded answer.
Obviously, right. You're an educator, right? I mean, when you've been educated, right, or you know you've been in that environment, right? There must have been a few things, right? You kind of had little inklings in the back of your mind. Oh well, this could be interesting if I was allowed to do this, right? Or
Sure.
well, that was like that really didn't hit me, and the reason that didn't hit me, I think, this, right? You know, so I think. You know, that's also another thing that I've been doing. You know, like I've been talking to a lot of you know, people that are educated, like Pam.
Yeah.
Right. You know, who's an extremely good teacher. Right. And I always found, right, that every subject, right, that I did excel in at school was because I had a very special relationship with the person who was teaching me.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Or I liked them, or, you know, I had respect for them. You know, and
Sure.
I think that's the thing for me, right? Is to make it as enjoyable for everyone as possible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, and special in some way.
Yeah, yeah. And you've got everything. The first set of courses already recorded, or is it still okay?
we are still kind of working on that because also there's been massive research, right, that we've been doing.
Yeah.
And you know, some of the ideas that I've presented haven't been done before. Right. I actually have to do them.
Yeah.
Like there's one hairstyle I've been working on for a month and a half now.
Wow.
And it's keeps evolving in places, right? And it's like every now and then, right, you kind of you end up doing something, right, and then realizing you are in a wormhole. Right?
Yeah.
You go,
Totally.
oh my god, like, oh, I could do this, I could do that, and if I did that, that would do that, and that would do that. And you know, like I'm not really good at answering questions, right, or following things through. Like I have to, right?
Yeah.
You know, I'm just kind of driven in that way. So if I have any questions in my head as to what can be done with something or where can it grow, you can bet your dollar, right? I'm gonna try those ideas out. The only problem is once you've tried those ideas out, another set of questions comes along,
right?
Which is really great because Pablo's like, you know, Eugene, come back, you know. You know, so we have a very interesting dynamic in that sense.
Yeah.
Right? He's almost adopted this role as you know, my kind of manager. He's sort of parenting me through this whole process. Well, you know, maybe you don't want to do that, Eugene, because maybe this week. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, Pab. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I shouldn't go down that road, should I? It's like, no, I don't think. No, I wouldn't do that if I were you. But I'll follow your advice, mate. You know.
So is it a matter? Is this a matter of constructing something, seeing the full vision, and then breaking it back down into its parts?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Like a mock-up, and then you're gonna.
Yeah, it's a little bit like if I were an artist, right, and I was doing a body of work, right, for a show. Mm-hmm. What I would be doing is I would be going through the process of making the show, but I would be doing like a little maquette of the show, of the space, and where all these things are going. I mean, we're doing some really good things. Like we you know, like we've got people that are collaborating with us. There's a photographer stroke artist who's a sculptor as well, and he's making new blockheads.
Oh, cool. That's great.
You know, like what we're really trying to do is we're really trying to kind of change a mindset and an aesthetic.
Yeah.
And we're trying to kind of amalgamate many worlds.
Man, it's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting.
And the guy's he's a really great sculptor as well. He's like really great.
Cool. Okay.
So, you know, I'm like, can I take one of those heads? And he's like, yeah, sure, you can take one of those heads. You know, and it's even like, you know, like we talk about, you know, like making a table, right? And I was like, I like the idea of like a concrete table, but I like the idea of maybe something falling off so you can see the steel infrastructure in the table, and maybe the table could be connected to the wall, but it looks like it's been pulled out of the wall. And, you know, so really what we're doing, right, is we're building up an environment out of our feelings.
Yeah. You're building Narnia so that we can come take a look.
Yeah, it will be maybe a bit more dystopian than Narnia, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, but you know, it's like it's kind of like if I could do hair, where would I like to do hair? I would like to create my own world, right? And that's hopefully what we're trying to do, you know. And you know, a lot of the research we've done has come from, you know, Bauhaus, you know, Courvoisier, like, you know, like it's kind of come from everywhere. It's like this eclectic world of lifestyle, industry, science, architecture.
I have to say, this sounds like so much more than what is apparent on the website. The website, it's pretty like straightforward, and I'm like, man, what you guys seem to be doing, I mean, it's very exciting. Like hearing about it versus looking at the website is a wildly different world.
Yeah, so, you know, it's kind of like we don't want to kind of like peak too early, right? And you know, like
sure.
Eventually we want to build stuff up, right? And we still want there to be surprises there, right?
Do you think people should go ahead and sign up? I mean, it looks like you can already purchase the course, right?
I mean, I would, but you know, but that's just me. But you know, I just think anyone that wants to see something done differently, come from a different perspective,
sure,
would want to see it, right? I guess. You know, like I had quite a deep conversation with my daughter about not this subject, but it does relate to the subject, and it's really incredible when you're actually you're having a conversation with someone, how that conversation can inform you creatively in another area.
Yeah.
Right, and I had the conversation last night, and I literally couldn't sleep. I was like, you know, it was like 3:30 in the morning. And I was like, the brain was just going like, you know, like, literally like spinning. And she's, you know, she's enrolling in an art college, right? And she went to see a BA final show in this art college, and she was telling me about it, and she was like, I'm really worried, you know, like it's like Dad is so good, like there was this piece there, and then this was about this and that and that and that and that, and she went with two of her friends that want to go as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I said, "What's their artwork like?" And she said, "It's like this. It's like the female one thing the girl's into is female form." Right, and I'm like, "Yeah, okay, all right." The other one's about the light and reflection, and I'm like, "Yeah, okay." And I said to her, I said, "So what do you feel your work's about?" And she said, "Well, self-discovery." And I was like, "Great." Right, and we started talking about concepts of self-discovery and, about art being a form of therapy and communication and, where do you look for inspiration? And I said to her, in one sense, you've got to kind of stop looking at art.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And go somewhere else. And she looked at me and I said, maybe you should be reading more. Maybe you should be reading about philosophy, you should be reading about politics. You should be buying really crap magazines, like Chat or Red. I don't know if you have the equivalent there, but they're like, celebrities and, everything like rubbish, popular crap culture. You should be reading about all of those things and looking at that and formulating an opinion and learning about yourself and then do something with it creatively. Then maybe look at some art or look at an album cover or do a drawing or look at an object, and find your voice.
Yeah.
The thing that colleges are really going to want to see, right, is you being totally engaged in what you're doing, right, and living for it.
Yep.
That's what they need to feel. Not like you presenting them with a folder of drawings or of your work. That's totally what they don't want. That's really not very interesting. And she's done some incredible art, right? I mean, she did some sculpture from ladies' tights, created these intestines, and she took her baby teeth and she cast them. She created mouths that are actually kind of consuming, these intestines. It's quite rich stuff, right? And I said, I think that's amazing what you're doing, because what you're doing is about consumption. Right, someone consuming themselves, and I said that's really where you need to start. And for me, art or any form of communication, visual communication, really is about conversation.
Yeah.
Right, so you need to create a conversation, right, and you need to be looking at areas that probably don't necessarily connect with one another, but find a connection with them and create, metaphors.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, it is. I bet it's super inspiring to see her find her way.
Well, I actually love watching her work.
Yeah,
because I can see she's just totally in a zone, right? When she's working, and there's nothing exists apart from that. She's completely.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing that I want to create with her, and that is something that's really very intense, that puts you in a zone where you are completely focused on what you're seeing.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, Eugene, man, I'm looking forward to it, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Really not a problem. It was an absolute pleasure, Clint.